Okay. Are we ready? So listen. This is coming as someone who has played every single mainline game, sequel, spin-off, mobile game. You have the list, the 80 plus games I've played. So it's starting us with 10. So okay, I'll preface this by saying, as I always say, Final Fantasy is whatever the hell you want it to be. Everyone's taste is different. Everyone's allowed to have their opinion. You could think everything I'm about to say is wrong. The reality is, I don't care. That's my 2 cents. Let's dive in. 10-2. Now, 10-2 has my favorite combat system in all of Final Fantasy outside of 5. I'm a job class girly. However, I don't love its OST very much. I think it fits the game very well. I don't hate 10-2 as much as most people. I also, I was really relieved to see a cast of all women as a woman who grew up loving Final Fantasy. I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to give it a C. I kind of want to give it a B. I love the combat so much that I want to give it a B. I think visually it's gorgeous. The music is fun. It does exactly what it set out to do. I'm gonna give it a B. I would give it a B minus if that were possible. I would give it a B minus if that were possible. I'm gonna give it a C. Final Fantasy X. Everyone's gonna get their pitchforks out. I love Final Fantasy X. We're listening to Final Fantasy X music right now. Beautiful game. Gorgeous game. Got a lot of people into the series for the first time. Love the use of the summons. I love the Aeons and how they are utilized in the story. Ending makes me sob uncontrollably every single time. Yuna is an all-time favorite Final Fantasy character for me. Top 3. I love it. I love its opening. I am going to give it an A and not an S tier. Why is that? I don't love its combat system, personally. The sphere grid is fine, but it doesn't wow me. I felt that it was, for me at least, I don't love it more on subsequent playthroughs. The initial introduction of its linearity really did bother me at the time. It's almost S tier for me. It might even bump up to S tier for me, but it's just, there's something about it, without spoiling things. I love the concept of sin. I think Spear is a really interesting world. What do we have next? Final Fantasy XI is going to be another A tier for me. This was Final Fantasy's first MMO. It's brilliant. It feels... it felt groundbreaking for its time. It was, graphically, it was great for an MMO at the time. It had really gripping storytelling elements in it. I felt that the races really felt distinct and mattered in Final Fantasy XI, where they don't feel like that for me in 14. 11's class structure felt like 5. I loved how they still tied in the series elements like the menus and such and the sounds into an MMO. So that is an A tier for me. Final Fantasy XII for me is A tier. I know people here that know me are going to be shocked and say, D, why isn't that S tier? You love Final Fantasy XII. I think it's because this is, I'm assuming this is without Zodiac Age. 12 is such a long game. There are points where I feel like its storytelling does trip a bit. I think a lot of this is because of this change of directors that had happened midway through. I just don't connect with all of its characters the way that I do other games in the series or would need to. I love its world. I think Ivalice is 10 out of 10 what carries the game for me. The score is great, but not quite where 10 or the others are. I'm comfortable saying it's an A tier Final Fantasy for me, I think. Fran and Balthier are amazing characters. I wish we got a spin-off game of just those two. I don't think I'll get yelled at for this next one. I really don't dislike Final Fantasy 13 too. I like it more than Final Fantasy 13. I think it improves the combat, makes it feel less sleepy. I think the story is more engaging. I think that the game is gorgeous. Okay, Revan and Wings for me. Listen, I don't hate Revenant Wings as much as a lot of the Final Fantasy fandom does. Now, if you don't know what it is, it's a tactical role-playing game that was released as a direct sequel to Final Fantasy XII. I think the gameplay was a little bit... It has a learning curve to it. It has, like, tower defense elements in it. It's a truly unique game on the Nintendo DS. I would love to figure out some sort of way to stream it because I would love to show it to people. It is, I think, really fun for what it is. I think that it is a game that performs pretty well. I don't think it contributes like a ton to the Final Fantasy XII world, but it is an Eve-Elise game. I'm gonna rank it below 13-2. It's not a D rank game for me. I don't know if there'll be a single D rank game for me in here. Next up is Lightning Returns Get Mad Haters. I'm giving that game a B. It is my favorite game in the Final Fantasy 13 bubble. It has I think the smoothest combat. It looks the best. I like its score the best. I think it has the strongest character moments. I think they flushed out a lot of the things I didn't like about the delivery of lore and world building in that game. I just couldn't hate it. I don't know what to tell you. I guess spoiler alert, because you're going to see me put 13 behind 10-2 here. Actually, I'm putting 13-2 ahead of it. Sorry, my B. My B. So this is what's interesting. So Final Fantasy XIV here is separate from every single individual expansion. Oh, this is the original launch. That's the D. The original Final Fantasy XIV was an absolute disaster. It was awful. It was terrible. It was the worst. I hated every second of it. It was buggy. It was a mess. I played at launch. The game was clunky. The quests were not interesting. The lore was like hardly delivered. It had its problem. Next up, we have Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn. I would give A Realm Reborn maybe a C now. We're trying to put it above 10-2. I think it probably deserves to be more of a B. I think it deserves to be more of a B. I'm giving it B. Because it is the other... I'm going to move it back to C. Because I think that it's a game that so many people haven't fully experienced because they haven't removed a lot of the filler in the most efficient way. And I think if they did, more people would be into it. I know a lot of people just skip it entirely, which is sad because the actual key story quests are great, but it's so much laborious work to get to them. So I'm going to give it a C. I do love the mechanics of 14. I love the way they introduce the classes. The class quests are amazing. Okay, I don't feel like it's fair for me to rank Endwalker because I haven't finished it yet. I'm still playing it. I love Heaven's Sword. I love it. Absolutely love it. Was moved. I cried more in that than I did in Stormblood. I felt that it was really powerful storytelling. I gave Heaven's Sword A tier. I love Heaven's Sword. It's my favorite expansion behind our first S tier, which is Shadowbringers. I felt like it ripped my heart out and I just loved it. I really enjoyed it. It was so good. It was so good. I can't. Stormblood is getting A tier for me as well. I really liked Stormblood. I didn't love it quite. I don't think I could put it above 11 in good conscience or Heaven's Sword, which I think is probably going to be an unpopular opinion. Quality. FF. Final Fantasy 15 for me is a complicated game to rank. If we're talking about the Royal Edition, I think it's a much better game. I found it hard to connect to the characters. I don't have an issue with the all-male cast like some people do, but I have an issue with the fact that I didn't get to know them as much. I think I love Noctis. Like, I love Noctis a lot. But the way the game was delivered, I mean, it was clearly, I think, just unfinished, right? I think if I was ranking the Royal Edition, I would put it I would probably put it in B tier. But I think that the biggest block of my enjoyment of 15 was that when major world events would happen and all these big things would happen in the game, you would go back to other towns and talk to them and no one was acknowledging anything. And it felt very static. The world felt very big just to be big. Felt empty to me. I didn't feel like the NPCs really had a sense of what was going on in the world. It made me I didn't get a sense of world building and connection to it. So It goes at the back of the C tier for me. I really don't have a great relationship with 15. Part of that is motion sickness too. It took me so goddamn long to beat it because it is not a very great game for people like me with motion sickness. Maybe we'll play Pocket Edition this weekend because I'd love to see that, but we shall see. Now, okay. Now the next one for me is Final Fantasy 1. This is tough because none of these other games would exist without Final Fantasy 1. If we are talking about it as here's the thing. I think Final Fantasy 1 is probably arguably one of the most replayable games in the entire series. It is the foundation in which everything else exists. As a standalone game, it is still entertaining. It is really phenomenal how it holds up. Even the original on the NES. There are bugs that can be very frustrating. It's buggy. It's got a learning curve. It can be challenging. Pixel remasters have smoothed a lot of that out. But I played it as recently as last year on original hardware, and I had the time of my life. I think the bosses are memorable. I love the story structure, the Warriors of Light. That it doesn't need to be more than it is. I really love it. I'm giving it an A. It's going to the front of the A tier for me. I love it. And it's wild to think that it started everything. Next up is Final Fantasy 2. I made a tweet about Final Fantasy 2 today. This game is so important to me. This game set the precedent that none of these games were going to be the same. This game set the precedent that Final Fantasy would be ever evolving, ever changing. Know that the combat has a learning curve. I know it can be frustrating. The stat leveling is strange. Pixel Remaster did mess with some of that and make it a little more accessible. Has some really iconic tracks, memorable tracks in its score. It's not a game I love to run back and replay, but it is nowhere near, I think, as awful as its reputation on the internet or in the fandom have garnered. It was something that was lower on my list, honestly, for a long time. But as time has shifted, I have definitely warmed up to Final Fantasy 2. I will put it in the B tier. Final Fantasy 3 might be the most difficult game on here for me to rank. It is, I think, a sleeper surprise joy to play. It introduces the first, job system that we're really gonna, get to see and play around with. It is a very interesting game. I love its story. I think the characters are very charming. There are some elements of Final Fantasy 3 that I really love that are still mentioned in Final Fantasy today. The Crystal Tower is an example of that. I think it really left an imprint on the series for a long time. And I do go back and play it pretty infrequently, I would say, but I do revisit it and I enjoy it. I think it's a solid B for me. Final Fantasy 3. It's a solid B. I believe. I think I would say a solid B. Final Fantasy 4. Number 1 up there in the S tier right now. This is one of my favorite video games of all time. I will admit to having a bias toward this game because it is the first Final Fantasy that I had played. The series had been out, but 4 was really the first one I had in my hands when it was released in the United States as Final Fantasy 2, and then I went back and played the older ones, but I absolutely love Final Fantasy 4. I think Cecil is one of the best protagonists the series has. Again, it really introduced storytelling in a way that was creative and interesting. They were weaving characters in and out of the story in a way that felt mostly natural. We had to see a lot of kind of significant emotional moments happen. It deals with loss. I think the way the summons are integrated into the story is super interesting with Rydia. I love that it gets weird. I know a lot of people hate that it gets weird and goes off the rails a little bit at the end, but I think that is the most charming thing about Final Fantasy IV. The difficulty that was released in the States isn't my favorite. I do prefer the Japanese difficulty that we got when we received the 3D remake, but I think this game and all of its versions are really playable, really fun, and it is a standout for me as my second favorite Final Fantasy of all time. Not to keep going on Final Fantasy IV, but the opening of Final Fantasy IV I think is one of the strongest openings in the entire series. It is so powerful. It just throws you right in. I love that you open up, you see those ships, you hear the Red Wings theme. It's just such a good track. Then all of a sudden you're murdering people and you're like, wait, am I the villain? Next up is real difficult for me. Final Fantasy V has my favorite combat system in all of Final Fantasy. I love how it handles its various acts, I will say, without spoiling too much of this plot. Ferris is a standout favorite character of mine. Love the score. I think visually it is stunning. I mean, you get to ride a dragon, okay? There are so many things that I could say about 5 and go on and on and on about. Absolutely love Final Fantasy V. It was really awesome seeing the developers of Final Fantasy 16 list their favorite Final Fantasies, and the only game that every single one of them mentioned was Final Fantasy V. I was so excited by that. It is amazing. It is an S tier game for me. I think it's wild how it just, I mean, we didn't get it here in the States. I think that hurt its notoriety a bit, but it's good. It's good. Next up is Final Fantasy VI. Final Fantasy VI. I don't think I need to say much about this. It is right there for me. I absolutely love this game. I think Final Fantasy VI is virtually like a perfect game. So I there's not much else I can say about it. Next up is Final Fantasy VII. I have hot takes with Final Fantasy VII. A lot of people have come for me and gotten mad at me over the years. Listen, I understand the significance of Final Fantasy VII. This series would not be where it is today without Final Fantasy VII. I was with this fandom in this series before Final Fantasy VII. I saw the gigantic shift in the world when 7 took over the world, okay? I was there through the whole thing. I mean, knowing what happened, Hironobu Sakaguchi lost his mother. So a lot of the concepts planning that went into 7 was to tackle the idea of death and that life can have impact after death. And that is a beautiful theme to me. And its narrative is so strong and so powerful. And I love that and I respect it. They are iconic and amazing, and I cry my eyes out playing 7. I don't connect to some of those characters as much as some people in the fandom do. One of my favorite things about 7 is the fact that it's like, who is the antagonist? We have this company, then we have this other person who just showed up, and then there's so many things going on. I love all of the balancing of that. But this game, for me, is an A tier game. It's the front of the A tier, but it doesn't crack into that S tier for me. It just doesn't, and that's fine. Sorry, I'm moving this. I'm putting it above. I'm moving my order around. I'm changing my order. I'm putting 12 ahead of 7 because it just is for me, but it is ahead of 1. Final Fantasy VIII is interesting to me. I love the junction system because it is designed to have you play any way that you want. If you know how to learn the system quick enough and you manipulate it, you can refine magic. You could become so overpowered in the first disc even. A lot of people are like, oh, you have to sit there and draw everything or run from every fight. That's not the case. There are a ton of ways. Oh, you just have to spam GFs. That's not how it works. I think there's a lot of people who misunderstand the system and how to utilize it properly. I had a lot of fun learning about the junction system, how best to get magic for it, how to refine items. Are the in-game tutorials great? No. The menu tutorials are great and get the point across. I have talked about this when we play 8. There are so many things woven together between Laguna's time and Squall's time that get missed by people. Dialogue options very early on in the game that people don't really see the strings and how it's all connected. I also love its setting. Its very distinctly European design influences are really, really, really amazing. I love that there are kids who act their age appropriately, and has my favorite, like I said, favorite OST in the series and probably some of my favorite locations. Next up for me, we got to get through this. My number 1 favorite video game of all time, this is a big, heavy 8-bit D-bias, is Final Fantasy IX. Final Fantasy IX is my favorite video game of all time. It is Hironobu Sakaguchi's love letter to the entire series. It has a top 3 OST for me. Vivi is my favorite character of all time. The way it introduced, the active time events was really cool. Getting to pop over and see what other characters were doing while you were wandering around shopping was so rewarding. The fact that it takes very subtle elements from other Final Fantasies, the bells, and lots of other little nods to the series throughout it. It truly feels like a Sakaguchi Final Fantasy fans Final Fantasy, and it will be very difficult for anything to ever top this game for me, because it has elements of what Final Fantasy IV had in it, where it goes off the rails a little bit at the end and gets a little weird. But I love that. And I also love its combat system. I love that it brought back 4 party members. I love that it is rewards grinding through learning abilities. I absolutely love Final Fantasy Tactics. I love Final Fantasy Tactics. So much so that it is going right there. A tactical RPG that, again, you can break it if you go like, let me play freaking calculators till I'm blue in the face, but it has a challenge and a half in it. Both versions are phenomenal. The script is great in both. The intrigue, the politics of this game, I love it. Oh my god, Ivalice is fantastic. The characters are just beautifully written. I can't think of a negative about this game. Next up, what do we got? Final Fantasy. Oh, okay. I really, really like this game, Grimoire of the Rift. This game I enjoy more than the first one. For those who are not familiar, this is a DS game. This game also features some cameos from other Ivalice characters, like Final Fantasy XII characters. It's a B tier, and that's for no other reason than the fact that I think it has it could have had a little bit more. And this is just my own feelings, right? This whole list is my own feelings. I think Luso, as a protagonist and a character, I didn't care enough. I didn't get invested until way too late in the game. And I think that's maybe a me thing. I need to go back and play it again. Good. Also, I'm changing my ranks again because I don't want to put a Realm Reborn above 10-2. I just don't. Anyway, I love Tactics Advance. I have streamed this game. We will stream it again. It doesn't have nearly the emotional impact of the first. I'd probably put it down here. I wouldn't put it below 13. I'd probably put it down in the C rank. Thank you for making it sparkle. All of these are solid games. Even games in the C tier are games that I love. I went into this game thinking that I was going to hate everything about its existence, that I was just going to be appalled and miserable and hate it. It takes place like 2 decades-ish after the original. Loved some elements of the combat, but not all of it. It felt like, and I think the big thing for me was I didn't like the writing. The story felt a bit disjointed and kind of all over the place for me. And it's very rare for me to give a game a D rate. And I've defended this game, and I'm like, it's not as bad as people say it is, so I don't want to rank it in the D tier, because then it seems like I'm just dunking on it like everybody else does, because I do feel like I am someone that appreciates that game more than most people I know that have played it. I think it could have been a lot worse than it was, if that makes sense. But that's that. And again, if I could rank Endwalker, it would be like here. I haven't finished it yet, but so far, as of right now, Endwalker is right here for me. I will finish Endwalker this weekend. But yeah, that's it. I don't think I'll change anything.